minus 20 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
And we are live, if I can put all of this together correctly. Hey everyone, it is May 13th, 2025. It is 4 p.m. local time here in Texas. If you're tuning in live or if you're watching this on the replay, let me know in the comment section if you can hear me and you can see me. And yes, I do have Mr. Jax, a special guest here, and he is antsy because he knows that there are TREATS's on the table, and so he is sniffing it out and waiting for me to give him one, which I will here in a second. But we wanted to come on live and to say thank you all so much for 100,000 subscribers here on YouTube. I know I'm also going live on Rumble and I believe on X. So if you're watching there, make sure that you're subscribed as well. But I wanted to hop on today to take some time to answer some questions. I've got some questions from my paid subscribers queued up. You're also welcome to ask questions in the live chat below. I know I've got some in there that I can toss to after I get done with the ones from my paid subscribers. And then we've also got a few topics to talk about today because, of course, there is a lot going on in the world. We have these upcoming talks that are supposed to happen in Istanbul. You've got Zelensky now throwing around his demands, which of course doesn't come as too much of a surprise, but he seems to think that he wants to meet with Vladimir Putin, or at least that's how he's making it sound. And then on top of all of that, we had Donald Trump in Saudi Arabia today saying quite a lot, making a lot of deals. And I do think it's worth a conversation on the broader consequences, right? Trump is just looking at the money. He's looking at all of the deals that are being made. He's up there condemning Western nation building, even though he has played a direct role in that during his time as president of the United States. So interesting to kind of see what's being said, a lot to get into, but thank y'all so much for taking the time to join me, for all of your support. I'm hoping to be live for about an hour today. So as always, chime in on the comments section. Let me see what we've got going on there. And I will give Jax his first treat because he has been patient. He has patiently waited, right? Here, do you want a treat? Do you want a treat? He's like, just there we go. He's discovered it and now figured it out, and he'll hang out here for a little bit. He won't be up here the whole time. We've got his bed right next to me, so I'm sure he'll go chill out there whenever he's ready to. Isn't that right, Jack? So you can sit down right here. But he's my good little buddy. So anyways, all right, I'm going to get into y'all's questions that we have so far. It looks like you can hear me and see me, so I have at least set it up that far. It's been a minute since I have done a live stream. I know that I say that every single time I do a live stream. One of these days I may get into doing them a bit more regularly, but I'm glad to have you all tuning in here. And when it comes to the questions, let's see again if I can do this properly. I get the graphic up on the screen. That is the first trial. All right. Today's first question comes from Adrian over on Patreon, and it is, how easy/difficult is it to be a truly independent journalist? And do you have any plans to visit Russia either for work or for pleasure? Well, first and foremost, I will say it is not easy to be an independent journalist. Thank you, Adrian, for the question. It's one of those things where I tried to work independently years ago when I was in college, when I was straight out of college, and was kind of overwhelmed by the big tech censorship at the time. A lot of the alternative media websites that I worked with or that I freelanced with were constantly up against it when it came to Facebook and YouTube, and that obviously still exists today. And so it is not an easy career path. I know that going through that the first time around is kind of what led me to working for RT America and then eventually RT in Moscow. And I'm grateful that I'm getting to work independently at the moment. I do see it as a privilege because I know what it's like to be in that place of really trying to make things work and not quite being there yet. And even right now, I'm still in the position where some months are better than others, right? I am reliant on Substack, Patreon, and unfortunately, in some ways, YouTube. I know that when I was, announcing that I had reached 100,000 subscribers, I got some comments from people going, well, okay, if they banned you 7 months ago, right? Why go back? Why rely on them? And we do live in a world where YouTube is still the largest video platform on the internet. And so, like it or not, if you can be on it, it is still a major place to be. At the same time, yes, I'm still putting all of my videos on Rumble, Odyssey, Rockfin, Minds, right? All of these other alternatives that exist out there. I'm still putting my videos there, happy to build a following there and looking for ways to continue to do that. So not just YouTube. As far as plans to visit Russia, unfortunately, I don't at the moment. I wish that I did. I don't have a current visa to Russia. If that changes, I will let y'all know. But I do hope to go back and visit at some point. Unfortunately, with everything going on with kind of the political climate that we're in right now, obviously the Trump administration isn't removing any of the sanctions that the Biden administration imposed on Russia. And so, while yes, you can still go there and you can freely visit, in terms of what I was able to do in terms of working for RT in Moscow and my job there, I would run into a lot of different barriers if I tried to do that right now. And so I'm just in a place where I'm happy to be working independently. I would love to go back at some point and would love to spend more time there. One of these days, I'm going to get to St. Petersburg. That was always the running joke when I lived in Moscow, was that every time I would plan a trip to St. Petersburg, something would happen or something would get in the way, and I never quite got there. So I have to go back, if nothing else, just to go and see St. Petersburg. I know that it is an incredible city, and so grateful for the time that I was able to spend there. I can't believe I've been back in the US now for about 2 years, and they have just flown right by. And so I'm grateful to be able to be a little bit closer to family and for everything that I've been able to be here for the last couple of years, and obviously for the experience that I had while I was there. All right, let me pull up the next question instead of just ranting away here, which I guess is the point of this live stream. But Scott on Substack asked, I was wondering what you would be doing if you weren't doing independent journalism. That is an interesting question, because I have always been a writer first and foremost. And so in a perfect world, I would love to do more writing. I would even love to write novels at some point. If that was ever an option, that is my biggest creative passion beyond journalism and everything that I'm getting to do right now. I always say that writing was my first love. And so, hold on, Jax has decided that he's checked out. All right, you want to go down there? Okay, he has made it down to his bed and he is burrowing his way in there. I'm sure he'll be back up a little bit later. But I always say that writing was my first love. And so I definitely think that that's something that I'd love to get more back into. It's funny because I started out in freelance writing when I was working as an independent journalist in college. And there was just such a big demand for video. That's kind of how I got into it. I did not want to be on TV. I did not have any goals in terms of, being a TV reporter or anything like that. That kind of just was the next step and was where I got to. But I saw that it was much more popular and that you were able to actually build a following and build a community with creating different videos. And I was like, wait a second, I can write, I can research, I can do all of that stuff, and I can do it in video format. And I also learned, that was one of the main things that I learned in college, was how to edit. And so that's why I know a lot of times I'll get on here and I'll start my videos by mentioning that I am a one-woman band, right? Everything that I do in terms of what you're seeing on the screen, I'm going in, I'm doing all of the writing, the research, the editing. Same with interviews. I'm doing all of the editing afterwards and all of the publishing and promotion that goes along with that. So I do work writing into my everyday job, but yeah, I never I have never worked for any mainstream media networks. I know everyone kind of has their different stories of how they get to this point, right? Some people work for CNN, Fox News, whatever it may be, and then they end up working independently. I've always either been independent or worked for some sort of alternative media outlet. I would include RT as an alternative more so than anything mainstream, but that's been my experience so far. And the next question, I was gonna say, so Ron on Patreon said I would find it interesting to hear more about your working as an independent journalist, post Russia and RT life, and all things Jax. I should note that I had added a couple of different prompts on there in terms of saying different options of what people could choose. I'm really hoping that Jax doesn't start barking because he looks like he's going to. He's going to include his way in here. Hold on just one second. This is what I, do you want to go under this one? Okay. This is what I get for live streaming with the dog, is that if you have a dachshund, you know that they love to burrow and they have to be perfectly under a blanket at all times when they want to take a nap. And now he is under the blanket, but he was working his way to get there. Anyways, I had mentioned, I was like, here's all the different things I'm happy to talk about. And so Ron picked a few of those. And yeah, I think I've covered working independently a little bit. In terms of post-Russia, post-RT life, it's been 2 years since I've been back in the US, and then it's been about 7 months since Sputnik, their outfit that was here in the US, since they shut down. And so it's been good. It's been good to make some progress, to actually be able to see things grow. And my YouTube channel is a big testament to that in terms of everything that has kind of come together here. I realize I need to catch up on a few of these questions before, or maybe go through them a little bit faster. I know I've got a couple up here that also relate to this. Hold on, let me see. All right, I'm going to put on this question from YouTube and mention this one, which is, I know that's pre-vet. I do not know the rest of that title, so thank you for your question. But it says, Dear Rachel, congratulations on this remarkable achievement. Can you tell us about how much time you spend on releasing one video? How much time does it take to collect, study, and do tech work? That is an interesting question. So in terms of the behind the scenes, if it is a solo video and it's just me, talking to you, I usually shoot for around 17 minutes. That's usually kind of the sweet spot. I usually spend about 1 to 2 hours writing and researching beforehand, sometimes more. I try not to write a full, word for word script that I'm then holding myself to when I record. I try to make it more of an outline. So I'm gathering all of the points that I want to make, right? I'm gathering different links, quotes, any video clips that I may throw into the video that you'll see pop up on the screen. And I'm also trying to lead with a title. That's another thing. I try to go into every video that I make. Interviews are a little bit different because the guest usually says something that I either, really stands out to me and I'm like, okay, that's the title. Even though I may have gone into it with some sort of idea of what it should be like, they usually kind of teach me along the way, which I appreciate. But in a solo video, right, I'm spending a couple of hours beforehand getting an idea together of what everything is going to look like. Then when I'm recording, I usually try not to record for more than 30 minutes because at that point I notice that I start to get repetitive, or I'm, I start to get repetitive saying one thing over and over again. I'm doing it already. But I usually, if my goal is to make a 17-minute video, I'm aiming for about 25 to 28 minutes of recording overall. And then I start the editing process. That usually takes about 2 hours. That's kind of the sweet spot. And I'm listening back to that footage. I'm throwing in graphics, noting all of the links that I did use on my post on Substack. I'm going in and kind of filing all of those and making sure that I have record of those. And then after that comes publication, and additional edits, right? So I'm editing clips from that video, throwing them up on X and Telegram. I'm posting the video in full on YouTube, Patreon, goodness, what am I blank? Substack, Rumble, Rockfin, Odyssey. So it's interesting how much of that work is actually sitting down from the in front of the camera and filming versus how much of the work is everything that goes before and after and all of the prep. And then in terms of putting everything together, posting it all over social media. And that ends up being kind of the most tedious part is once I've created the product, then I'm like, oh, now I got to go in and promote this, right? Because no one's going to promote this video or share it to all of these different social media networks if I don't do it. So I'm glad that I get to do that. It is a privilege, but it does make for a full, quote unquote work day. And one of the best pieces of advice that I was given when I kind of got into this, and I was at that point where we knew that the Biden administration was, putting these sanctions onto any sort of funding sources that came from Russia. And we knew that it was likely that obviously that was going to impact operations, impact the paycheck that I was getting from the version of Sputnik that was here in the US. One of the best pieces of advice that I got was, if you want this to be your job, you need to treat it like your full-time job, right? You need to be putting in the work every single day, getting up, putting out videos, churning out content, paying attention to the news, right? Continuing to innovate along the way if you want this to be your full-time job. You can't just throw up a few YouTube videos a week and expect that it's going to create 100,000 subscribers or, actual income that is able to sustain you. And that was just kind of this like light bulb moment for me, because I had been, putting regular content on my YouTube channel, and that's something that I had done for years, but I hadn't been in a place where I had really made it my, quote unquote full-time job, and really decided that every day I'm going to get up and I'm going to plan out my week. And that's another thing that goes into it, right? Every week I'm planning out, okay, how many interviews am I going to have? Which guest am I going to ask to be on my show? Which guests are also at the same time confirming, right? And making sure that I have kind of a good rotation of people that y'all like to see, that I'm not bringing on too much, that I'm bringing on just enough. There's a lot of work that kind of goes into the strategy of all of it, deciding which topics to cover, how many solo videos that I'm going to do. And so I think that there is a lot that goes on the back end that you may not necessarily see, right? You're seeing the videos that come up, but there is a lot in terms of the hours that go in. But it's one of those things where I'm so grateful to be putting in all of that time and all of that work. It's not, there are some days where it gets tiring, but there's also that place where I look at it and I'm like, to be in this place of building this platform and building this community, I am so fortunate to do that. And again, I do see it as an absolute privilege, right? To be here, to be at this point with 100,000 subscribers. And I'm grateful to all of you. All right, I'll get on to the next question. As I said before, I was going to stop rambling, but that's exactly what I guess here to do. Let me see. Okay, back to the paid subscriber questions, if I can remember that portion. I believe I'm on 4. Oh, this is one I've gotten a couple on this one. So Andrew on Patreon asked, how do you identify politically in terms of Democrat, Republican, Independent? Also, would you consider yourself more liberal or traditional conservative on cultural, social, and economic issues? It's so funny because these are things that I have really kind of honed in my coverage that is foreign policy related, and I still get a lot of questions like these. And when it comes to political affiliation, I most times just say independent, because I look at the Republican and Democratic parties and I'm like, okay, I don't really identify with either one of them. In terms of social issues, I will say those are topics that I don't talk as much about, because I feel like the media has the public so incredibly divided. And so, from my point of view, I'm like, look, for adults in this country, in any country, if you are an adult and you're not harming anyone else, live the life you want to live. Like, it is not for me to tell you how to live your life as long as you are not harming anyone else. And that's kind of where I stand. But I find that I don't get into a lot of those social issues just because the way that the media kind of amps them up, and like the trigger words that are associated with everything. I had an interview, I guess last week now, that I did, where I was talking to a good friend of mine and a regular guest, George Samueli, and we were talking about a candidate in Romania, and I had the term far right included in the title. And when I was throwing it in there, I was not thinking like, oh, this is a derogatory term. I understand how some people see it that way. But when I was putting it in the title, I was just like, oh, this is just kind of the description that I've seen everywhere for this candidate. I'm throwing it in there. I didn't think too much about it. And then I got a lot of feedback on that. And it was interesting to kind of see, and I completely understand why people were frustrated with that. But I realized when I was adding it in, I was just kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, and didn't really think of it as, I thought of it as more, yes, he is on the far right, not so much, this is what the media is really amping up, and this is how they are really kind of presenting it to the public in terms of trying to paint this candidate out to be a bad person. This is the term that they are using. In terms of economics, I will say, personally, I always say I lean more libertarian, not necessarily with the Libertarian Party here in the US, because they're always a bit of a mess, but I do lean more libertarian. I think that's more driven on the fact that I just don't trust the government. Now, I do enjoy having conversations with people from all viewpoints on economics, on political systems. I have a lot of them on my show. As you'll see, I have plenty of Marxist socialists that come on my show that I talk to, and I talk to them about economics. And while there may be some things that we don't necessarily agree on, I do appreciate the fact that we're able to have conversations, that there's a lot that we do agree on in our criticisms of the US government, US hegemony, the way that things are run, the fact that the US government is getting bigger and bigger every day and has such a focus on destruction all around the world. And so that's also kind of why, while I may have one set of beliefs on my end in terms that it's based on my personal experience, I also try to be able to look at the world around me and go, okay, what are other things that I can consider? What are other conversations that I can have? And I always try to be open-minded to the world around me, even if I look at some of these systems and I think, hey, I don't know that that would ever work in the United States, but that's coming from a place of being so cynical about the US government and about the way that things are run, that even if they were to come out tomorrow and say, hey, we came out with this magical system, right? We're going to have healthcare, we're going to have, maternity leave, right? All of these different things that would benefit the public in terms of, you would think that they would. I think I would still be looking at it and going, okay, what's the catch? Because as we're seeing, there's always a catch with just about everything that they do. Now, the next question I wanted to throw up here, I believe, okay, this one is, and this is kind of one of those that I'm glad I got this question, because it's something that I will be able to think on and kind of use in other segments. And this is the question: as multipolarity reshapes global power, how can smaller nations navigate the economic and strategic pressures of US-China rivalry without becoming mere pawns? And, when I was reading that the first time, I thought I would love to do more segments and have more interviews on some of these smaller countries that are being impacted by this, because we talk all the time about this growing multipolar world, and we look at the countries that are rising up in terms of Russia and China and other, we can throw Saudi Arabia in there. I know that the US is certainly getting lots of deals done with them today, we'll put it that way. But it does make me wonder, for those smaller countries, they almost have to kind of find someone to work with, right? They have to consider the pros and cons, whether it's the US, whether it's China, Russia, the BRICS alliance, that sort of thing. For a lot of these smaller countries, they're having to not only make that decision, but to deal with the consequences of it. The consequences of which up until this point has been the US targeting them. And that goes from, across, whether it's the Middle East or Southeast Asia or West Africa. I mean, it's like, name a small country in the world. You look at the ways that the US has been able to manipulate their way around, right? Use the IMF and these other massive loans to get these countries into debt, to get them indebted to the West as a whole. And while, yes, you have China presenting alternatives to that, I also think it's going to be interesting to see how things move forward. If we get a truly multipolar world, or if we're kind of moving into a world where, yes, you do have a lot of these major countries that are being the ones to quote unquote run things, but that still is having an effect on the much smaller countries that are caught up in the fray, if you will. All right, I'm going to check in on some of these comments here now. Let me see where I've got a comment on Rumble that says, yay, a live stream. Can we all pretend the backstory is back? This could be a version of that, if you will. I may have done a live stream since then, but it's been a while since I have done my radio show that I previously did for Sputnik that was shut down back in October. And, it's interesting because that was a 2-hour daily radio show, and it was fun to do. It was fun to have, a lot of different guests, because I had 4 guests on per day, covered a lot of different stories. And in my coverage since then, I've kind of focused on one main video a day. And that has been really my focus is, okay, we're going to focus on one story each day, unless, of course, there's a lot of breaking news or, there are other things that I feel like need to be covered that day. And it has been cool to kind of hone in on, okay, what is the big story of the day that I want to really focus on and, kind of put my time towards. And that also goes for the interviews that I'm able to do and the conversations that I'm able to have there, to really focus in on one interview and one conversation versus having, multiple different ones. All of it's good. It's just kind of different times for different seasons, I would say. Let me see what else we've got going on here. Got another question about timing. I'll throw this one up here. This is, how many hours per week do you typically spend on your research, interviews, editing, and other things in your work? How much does this vary if there's a busy week in the news cycle? That's a good question. So a lot of ones about timing and preparation. I usually try to work. I mean, my goal is a full work day during the week, from typically Monday through Friday. Saturday is usually my day off. And then Sunday, I'm working on Sanctioned, which is my exclusive weekly series for my paid subscribers. And so when it comes to an average work week, it really depends. And I mean that honestly, because there's some days where I'm at it for 12 hours a day. There's other days where, it's more like 6 to 8 hours. It really just depends on the news cycle and kind of what's going on. And to a certain extent too, right? How many of these stories, if it's something like the latest updates from Russia, Ukraine, that I'm able to look at and say, okay, what's the latest there? I already kind of know it, versus if I'm, talking about the election in Romania, something I'm not as familiar with, then I'm having to put in more work in order to familiarize myself with it. And yeah, you do see a lot of the same patterns, but at the same time, you also do have to, and that is another thing that I've learned in terms of having a lot of different guests on, where they come on either every month, or you have the Mark Sloboda who's on every other week, if not every week, where I'm going, okay, what is a different question I can ask him that I haven't asked him before, right? Or what is another topic or another angle here that we can kind of throw into this conversation? That way it's interesting for y'all too, and you don't feel like you're watching the same conversation over and over again, and that way we're not having the same one. Another question here on YouTube. Could you comment on the incestuous relationship between President Trump, Puppet Zelensky, and Larry Fink of BlackRock, who is now weaseling into the Saudi negotiations? Yeah, I'm hoping to kind of get into that here in a second, in terms of the quote unquote deals that are being made. But that did stand out to me that it wasn't just Trump going to Saudi Arabia this week. Oh, was the CEO of BlackRock, Palantir, Citigroup. There are several others there. Elon Musk is, of course, there. He couldn't miss it. That are going along with him for this U.S. Saudi, investment extravaganza, if you will. And I'm looking at this and going, Trump is really leading with the billionaires and the millionaires and all of these other people that are surrounding him. He's really leading with that the first time, this time around, I should say, if he didn't do enough of it during his first term. And it's been interesting to kind of see the back and forth with Zelensky. I'm hoping to get into that as well in terms of where things stand, because we keep seeing Trump where one day he's criticizing Zelensky, the next day he's acting like, oh, everything's fine, right? We're working out this deal with Zelensky and now we just need to get Putin on board. And yeah, it's people like those that are behind BlackRock that are looking at all of these different quote unquote deals. In other words, looking at how can we take advantage of insert country here. And they're not hiding in the shadows as much as they used to. I will say that much. All right, let me get into the latest here. We've got a comment from Eric that says, I will just say I'm a big fan of yours. I wish you still had a presence on a radio show. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Yeah, and that's something, that's definitely something that I'm open to in the future. I think that I've kind of been back and forth in terms of how I want to structure things. If I want to do more live streams like this one where I'm here to answer questions, if I want to do more YouTube videos, goodness, interviews or solo videos and that sort of thing. So I'm still kind of figuring that out and open to, kind of various methods of doing things. I do not have it all figured out right now. And let me see what else we've got going on here. Thank you for all the comments about Jackson now that I'm finally catching up to them 30 minutes later. This one is an interesting one. Do you think Putin will meet Zelensky in Turkey? Now, I will say, when I was watching the back and forth, when I was watching what Russian President Putin had to say in his speech, I believe Sunday was when he, mentioned the direct talks. And he said, hey, we're calling on Kiev, because as a reminder here, a couple months ago, we'll say, Russia was in a position of saying, hey, we don't necessarily want to talk to Zelensky because he's not the legitimate president of Ukraine, right? His term expired in May 2024. Ukraine clearly has not had elections, so the Ukrainian people have not been able to decide who is, going to be their current president. And so because of that, Russia had been in this place of saying, hey, we don't know if we can even really make a deal with Ukraine. We'd have to make it with, their parliament or in terms of we have to rely on their legislative body in order to set anything in stone. We can't make a deal directly with Zelensky. And then you saw the rhetoric from Russia shift a little bit in recent weeks. They said, hey, we will agree to have direct talks with Zelensky. And then this week, Putin said, okay, sure, we are inviting Kiev to come back to Istanbul. And I think the reason that he's doing that is because it's a reminder to the entire world that Russia was open to talks, that talks did happen between Russia and Ukraine directly in Istanbul back in 2022 in March, and then it went into April, and there was a draft agreement that then UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson went to Kiev. He had this special surprise meeting with Zelensky. And then all of a sudden, Kiev was pulling out of this deal, even as Russia was there saying, hey, we want to make a deal with you. We're moving troops back from Kiev, right? We're giving you a gesture of goodwill and trying to work with you. And so because of that, because you had this position where Russia was in, where they did try to have these talks, Putin is now saying, hey, you can come back to Istanbul, right? We're happy to have direct negotiations. But I will say, when I was watching his speech, I didn't necessarily get the takeaway that Putin was saying he was going to be there in Istanbul waiting for Zelensky, because he said, hey, we'll do direct negotiations. But Putin wasn't in Istanbul in 2022 as a part of those negotiations. He was sending a team to engage in these talks. So I don't think that he's going to be there on Thursday. I would be legitimately surprised if he was, because from everything we've seen from the Russian side, they do not want to send Putin to just engage in talks, right? That's why they've kind of been holding off on this Trump-Putin meeting up until this point. They want, when Putin and Trump meet and shake hands and it's a whole media debacle, they want that to be when they announce that there is a deal, not for it to be one of these meetings where we get together and we hash this out. Because right now, it's hard to think of there actually being a deal made, because you still have Zelensky in this point of saying that, yeah, sure, he'll have, diplomatic negotiations, whatever, but he still has no plans to recognize not just the 4 territories that voted to join Russia in 2022, but to recognize Crimea. And Crimea has been reincorporated into Russia for over a decade now. So if Zelensky is refusing to even recognize Crimea, then it's kind of hard to see where Russia would be willing to engage in a deal, not to mention the fact that some of the biggest concerns that Russia has raised in terms of, okay, if there is a deal, how do we ensure that it is implemented correctly? Number one. And number two, if there is a deal, what does this mean for NATO support for Kiev? Because that's another thing that Russia has called for, is this demand for neutrality. That's not just Kiev saying, okay, we won't try to join NATO. That is NATO saying, hey, we won't keep arming Kiev to the teeth for a future war against Russia. So these are things that I don't see Russia pulling back on. Sure, they're engaging in talks. They are making it look like they're walking towards an agreement. And maybe in some cases they do want some sort of an agreement, but they also want these ironclad guarantees from Kiev and from the US. And it just does not look like we are at the place right now of getting there. That was a very long answer to a short question, but that is kind of how I'm looking at it at the moment. All right, let's see what else we've got going on here. Alrighty, this question. Do you think that Trump going to Saudi Arabia for his first presidential visit was a snub to Israel? Thanks as always for your passion and determination to get your views out. Keep up the good work. Thank you, Simple Truth. I appreciate the kind words. And I don't actually. And I would say maybe if there hadn't been, Netanyahu making 2 trips to the White House weeks apart, maybe that would be the case. I think that there is a very big attempt by the Trump administration right now to look like there is distance between him and Netanyahu, right? We've seen the reports that Trump cut off contact with Netanyahu. We've seen the reports that, I've seen it even, I don't have the link with me, but I was reading it earlier, a report talking about, how Netanyahu was left out in the cold as Trump is in Saudi Arabia and he's being embraced there. And I know that there are some of these different, posts on social media saying, well, Trump is really cozying up to Saudi Arabia. That's because he wants, and he said it in today's speech, he wants Saudi Arabia in the Abraham Accords, right? He wants those deals made, around $1 trillion worth of deals made with Saudi Arabia. And that is kind of his biggest thing at the moment. Now, I personally think that Netanyahu and Israel are completely on board because, and this is something that we talked about. It's something I talked about in my episode of Sanction from Sunday that you can find if you sign up as a paid subscriber. But I will mention a portion of it that we discussed this, I believe it was last month, in my latest interview with Brian Berletic, when we were talking about these policy papers, one of which dated back to 2009. It was from the Brookings Institute. And they talked about this scenario where the US was, encouraging or allowing a strike on Iran. They were doing that by encouraging or allowing Israel to carry out that strike, and making it look like there was all of this space between the US and Israel, that the US was the one that wanted to talk to Iran, that wanted to make a deal with Iran, and that Israel was just the crazy guy in the Middle East who was bombing Iran, even though the US is obviously supporting Israel all along the way. And when we look at the fact that, Trump, the US, they're still openly supporting genocide of the Palestinian people, right? I am not seeing Trump say at this moment, allow the humanitarian aid back into Gaza, stop bombing Gaza, right? I'm not seeing him tell Netanyahu, we are pulling all support for you until you do XYZ related to bringing an end to the genocide of the Palestinian people. And even then, I would still be a little bit skeptical, even if you were saying all of the quote unquote right things. He's not doing that right now. But it is very telling to me that the US is still supporting Israel in this genocide. Therefore, a lot of what we're seeing right now in terms of this quote unquote distance between Trump and Netanyahu, it just feels like theater in order for Trump to try to get what he wants from Saudi Arabia. And, we're seeing Trump, and I'll get into this here in a second, about him kind of cozying up to Syria, talking about, he's going to, drop all of the sanctions on Syria all of a sudden. He's not doing that because he cares about the Syrian people. If he cared about the Syrian people, he would have brought an end to those sanctions in his first term in office, right? He would have pulled all of the US troops out of Syria during his first term. No, he's doing that because now you have an Al-Qaeda regime in Damascus that is talking about normalization with Israel. That's why Trump is suddenly in the position of wanting to cozy up to Syria, not because he cares about the people, but because he sees the political climate as being just right, at least in his mind. All right, getting back to the latest comments here. Thank you all so much for chiming in here. And let me see this comment. If CNN offered you an on-air spot, but they kept editorial control, would you take it? No, I think that is one of those things that I've learned this from working, even just the work that I have done in TV news. The editorial control is the most important thing that you have. But beyond that, I think being able to have control over, okay, what stories are we covering today? What angles are we choosing, right? What guest are we interviewing? That is what so much of my work is about. I mean, if I could come on here and repeat whatever Fox News, CNN, whatever any of them say at any given day, that doesn't take much work. It's about looking at these stories. And even just in the case of what's going on today, there are a lot of people that are talking and they're like, Trump is bringing peace to the Middle East, right? Look at what he's saying. He's criticizing nation building in the Middle East. And I'm looking at this and going, okay, but it's taking that extra step of looking at the situation and going, okay, what is Trump? What are his real aims here? Number one. But number two, what is the bigger picture, right? Has Trump cut off support for Israel? No, not whatsoever. And to that point, I think that one of the issues that we've gotten into with cable news, and that includes CNN, Fox News, all of them, is that they are in this 24/7 news cycle. And so it's jumping from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. And being able to kind of take a step back from that. And I know I do still do videos on, Trump said this today, but my goal is always to take a step back and say, okay, Trump said this, but this is the bigger picture surrounding it, right? This is the context that if I'm trying to educate you in any way, this is the context that needs to surround what Trump is saying at this moment, right? These are the actions, these are the policies he's actually taking versus just what he's saying. Because if you just go off of what he's saying, you are going to be on a roller coaster of emotions, right? Where 1 minute he's talking about forcing the Palestinians out of the Gaza Strip, off of their land, refusing their right to return. And then the next minute he's like, did I say that? It's like, yeah, you did say that. And we need to look at your policies that are, again, openly supporting ethnic cleansing. All right, let's see what we've got going on here. A comment here with a super chat. The last time I had a live stream, I think I had my YouTube channel had turned off super chats for some reason. So thank you so much to all of you who are submitting those. This one says, congratulations on achieving 100K. Thank you so much. I did with everything with YouTube, I question whether or not we are going to get here, but I'm grateful that we were able to get to this point. Let me see what else we have here. Thank you to all the people chiming in who submitted questions and are now here watching the live stream. That's cool to see. Let me see the comments here, what we've got going on, and then I'll get into some of the latest of what Trump had to say. This one from YouTube from John Campbell says, you could always write a book about an East European leader hooked on cocaine that starts a third world war, nuclear. That's funny. Hey, there's always that. I definitely at some point, I don't know that, in terms of what I would write about, that's one of those things that I kind of go back and forth on. And of course, I'm always curious to hear what y'all would think about that, because a lot of people do write books every day. I have plenty of them behind me on my bookshelf from a lot of the different guests that I have on this show. If I have a guest on and they have written a book that I think may be interesting, I always try to get their book. I need to spend a bit more time reading. That is my thing. Maybe a little bit less writing, a little bit more reading is where I'm at the moment, because I have quite the collection here. And let me see. This is a good question, and this is not related to news, but who would be your favorite novelist / novel? I do not know if I have one. And again, not related to news. I love a good rom-com novel, and that's typically what I will read when I need a break from news. I typically go to the exact opposite end of the spectrum, where I'm like, okay, what is the most ridiculous novel that I can read? I do have, not ridiculous, I shouldn't say that, but I do have a few from Elin Hilderbrand. She is one of my favorite to read when I need time that I am like, I'm so done with, news, politics, everything that I cover on a daily basis, and I want to go to the exact opposite. And all of her novels take place on Nantucket, somewhere where I have never been. So I enjoy reading about that in my spare time. Alrighty, let me see. This one is a long comment. Let me see. All right. I'm doubtful that very little will be solved in Istanbul talks. The unshaved scumbag, whom I used to call little Adolf Churchill, that is a name for him, never was educated, neither instructed in laws of diplomacy and war. Yeah. And, you get to the point where, and to a certain extent, I mean, yeah, Russia's in this position of saying, hey, sure, we'll carry out talks with you. Like, sure, we'll talk, no problem. But then you take a step back and you go, okay, Russia's having plenty of these talks, because obviously there is a lot for the US and Russia to talk about that doesn't even have anything to do with Ukraine or with this current proxy war that the US is fighting against Russia. And I agree. I don't think that it's going to be a watershed moment. Right now, it's kind of a publicity stunt. It's a power grab back and forth between Zelensky being like, oh, sure, I'll go, but Putin has to go, right? And now Trump, I guess reportedly, there have been some reports that Trump may possibly show up there. I guess if Putin and Zelensky were going to be there, then Trump may want to decide that he was going to join the party, if you could call it that. But it seems like from right now that he is going to send, notably, so Steve Witkoff, the Middle East envoy who he sends to everything, but also Keith Kellogg. That's according to reports. We have yet to see, confirmation that Kellogg is going, but that's an interesting one to me too, because Kellogg has kind of been pulled off of the US-Russia talks over, and we did see these reports that he was too friendly to Ukraine. So I guess if Ukraine is involved, I could see why they're throwing Kellogg in there. But we know that Russia's not going to like that. So interesting to kind of see the role that the Trump administration is trying to play. I'm curious as to how much Marco Rubio is playing a role in influencing some of these decisions, although we haven't seen confirmation that Rubio is going. I would think that he would send himself there if he could. All right, let me see what else we've got going on here as I'm trying to catch up a little bit on some of these comments here. And people saying that they moved overseas. Hey, more power to you. I think I am I am very much a Texan at heart. This is my home, but I also am open to more travel in the future. It just has not been included in the last couple of years, I will say, but hopefully more so in the future. Let me see. Someone says, this comment says, do you need more staff? Yes. Unfortunately, in order to get more staff, you have to get more income to get to that point. Maybe we'll get there eventually. I am just happy to be able to work independently and keep a roof over my head. And that is kind of where I'm at the moment, right? I'm not asking for too much. If it keeps building up to that point, I'm happy to keep building with it. But at the same time, I'm just grateful for kind of the progress that I'm making at the moment. Let me see. Yeah, another comment here says it's brave being totally independent from a purely paycheck aspect. Yes, that I will agree. It is. There is something to be said for having a regular paycheck, knowing exactly how much you're going to make every month. Working independently, you do not have that. That's why I'm grateful for the paid subscribers that I do have on Patreon and on Substack, because at least I know from those two platforms kind of what I'm going to be making from any given month. I mean, yeah, there some months you get new people, you lose a few people. That's just kind of how it goes. Obviously, everyone has a different financial situation. And so I completely understand that I'll get people who they can subscribe for a few months and then it's, not in their finances, or maybe they just have other things that they're interested in and want to contribute to. And I completely understand that. And so I'm grateful for those two platforms and hoping that they continue to build. And then YouTube, it really just varies. It depends on views. It depends on how gracious the YouTube algorithm wants to be. And even for some of those videos where I had my most recent video actually is up over 250,000 views in 24 hours, which is the highest I have ever gotten in that time period ever. And I think it's up to the second most viewed video on my platform. I'm curious to see how much that one actually makes, because I think a lot of people, they see those views and they're like, oh, that's going to make a lot of money. And it's like, well, it depends on how YouTube views it, what ads it puts on it, the click rate there, how much people watch. It is an entire mathematical equation. And then it's also just YouTube being YouTube at the end of the day. So that is another factor to kind of take into account. And then, yes, as I went through it back in October, YouTube could ban my channel at any time. And so, yeah, the stress that comes from working independently is just different. You have the freedom of being able to wake up every day and to decide what stories you're going to cover. You also have the stress of making sure that you're on top of everything, hoping that everything kind of works out and comes together. And yes, that YouTube does not take down your channel. So it is one of those things. I'm at where I'm at right now. I'm curious to kind of see how things go in the future. If things keep working the way that they are, I'm happy to stay here and keep doing things as I am, obviously, if they keep working. But you also have to be prepared to adapt at a moment's notice. And you have to be prepared that just because I have this setup right now that I do, that it may not always stay that way. And it's just kind of part of the of how things work. Another question. Are you originally from Texas? I love the y'all. I am. I have family in Texas and I have family in Oregon. I grew up mostly in Texas though. And that's kind of where I don't have much of an accent. I do enjoy throwing a y'all in there because that's what I use normally, but I get that a lot, that people are like, are you actually from Texas? Because you don't sound like you're from there. And I'm like, yeah, I know that I don't have much of an accent, maybe for better or for worse on that one, but that's just kind of how things ended up. All right, next comment here. In my humble opinion, this thing with Russia and Zelensky is smoke and mirrors, as well as the whole tariff thing. Things are not what they seem. Yeah, the tariff situation has been interesting to watch. And I know I talked about this in my video with Carl Zaw yesterday that was uploaded. And it was kind of crazy to think that, Trump comes out in early April, he declares Liberation Day, he's putting tariffs on all of these countries, and then he's telling people, hey, you have to feel the pain, right? It's not going to be easy right away. It's going to be painful for a little bit. And then he's turning around and just like, oh, okay, no, we're done with tariffs here and tariffs there. We're putting a 90-day waiting period on this. And I'm like, okay, if you genuinely believe that tariffs are the way to go, that this is the way that we need to operate as an economy, putting an additional tax on all of these businesses here in the US that import products from other countries, then you're not even sticking to that, because all you really wanted was for all of these countries to come to you and to try to work out a deal with you. That's kind of how how it at least seems to me. And I agree when it comes to the whole thing with Russia and Ukraine and the US and the Trump administration talking about a 30-day ceasefire. And it's like they're only talking about a full 30-day ceasefire because they're trying to get Russia to say no to it, because they're trying to get an outright niet coming from Russia. We're not going to do that. Russia on its end is like, sure, we'd love to have a 30-day ceasefire. Now, how are we actually going to ensure that that is a legitimate ceasefire that we're able to impose? And how is it not going to backfire on us on the Russian side? Because there's no guarantee that the US and all of NATO are not going to use those 30 days to not just rearm Kiev and their military, but to also potentially send troops into Ukraine as quote unquote peacekeepers. That is another big concern there. All right, let me check on the next comment. I was going to see if Jax wanted to get up here, but he is passed out. I need the little mini Jax cam in the corner over here. I know I've gotten that comment on a few different videos of people being like, we need, and then I also, to be fair, it is not all love for the Jacks. I also get comments from people that are like, what is with the dog? This is not serious. And I'm like, you know what? A lot of the topics, most of the topics that I cover are very serious, right? They are World War III. They are genocide. They are horrific, terrible news, or we're on the brink of ending the world as we know it. So if here and there I can start a video with a cute little dog here for, the first minute or two, I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing. I get more positive feedback than negative, because I think that, at the end of the day, I'm human just as y'all are, and I'm happy to kind of show you other parts of my life that I have here that aren't just straight news at the end of the day. All right, let me see all the comments. Thank you for all the kind words and congratulations, as I am now catching up and getting my way through. All right, this one says 100K is an accomplishment in a short time. It's been a little bit of a long time coming, I will say. Now, granted, I obviously, like I was saying earlier, I am so grateful to be at this point because I have been working at this for several years now. I mean, I've been working as an independent journalist for, almost 11. It'll be 11 years on June 1st. And I am in this position where I've been uploading videos to YouTube. I think I started in about 2015. It was 2015. And when I started doing like my first original rant videos that are not on my YouTube channel anymore for good reason, not even because of the topics or anything like that, because my messaging and what I was saying in 2015 is the same as what I'm saying in 2025, but more so just because when you're in college and you do your own videos, the quality is not that great. And I've learned and grown a lot since then. So it's kind of funny how some people, they may look back and be like, oh, I can't believe I said that. I'm like, mine is not that. It's that I've grown a lot and the quality of my videos has changed and the style of presenting has changed a lot over the last decade, and I'm grateful that I've gotten to this point, because I'm sure as anyone who has put content on the internet, you can look back and cringe at all of the stuff that you did beforehand. And I relate to that even as recently as a couple years ago, maybe even a year ago. It's tough. That is the one drawback, is sometimes when you see your old videos and you're like, oh yeah, that was the content that I put out there. That was me at 1920 releasing videos, commenting on the current state of the world. While things are not that different, at least I can say I have grown since then, and I am grateful for that. All right, let me see the latest here, as I'm still trying to catch up a little bit. Thank you all for all of your comments and for chiming in. That always makes it fun to kind of hear your feedback as I'm doing this video. Let me see. Another comment here says, let me hold on, get through those. All right. Okay, some guest requests. I will take note of the guests that y'all are mentioning and definitely try to reach out to them, because I'm always kind of in the place of trying to combine the regular guests that y'all really like to see, that you enjoy having on, with the new guests that, maybe can come in and mix things up a little bit. Oh, this is a good comment. Congratulations on 100K. Any tips on doing deep research well for beginners? Do you read a lot of books? Your ability to contextualize news is phenomenal. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And thank you for the super chat there. Oh, that is actually a really good question. I need to do more reading from books. I have a whole shelf of books behind me that I need to read. And on top of that, I opened a PO box and asked people to send me books. And I've just added to my reading list, which I'm grateful for. I do need to get on that more. In terms of research, I would say, well, first and foremost, having a variety of sources is really important. And I read a little bit of everything, right? I'm looking at the CNN, the Fox News, the Reuters, Associated Press. I'm also including in RT, Al Jazeera, antiwar.com is one of my favorites for foreign policy news on a daily basis. And really kind of taking into account, and I think this kind of goes into the media literacy of it all, of being aware of, okay, why are they telling me what they're telling me, right? And paying attention to the wording in some of these articles, and kind of the, we saw this with the start of the war in Ukraine, or really the escalation of the war in Ukraine back in 2022, when you had so many media outlets that they immediately start using the word invaded, or they use the term, it's Russia's war in Ukraine. And it's like, okay, why are they doing that, right? Why are they removing all of the context of the conflict that the US primarily started back in, well, not even started in 2014, really escalated at the time in 2014 with a coup in Kiev. And so I think my response to that would be, having a variety of sources, but really being mindful of kind of what you're reading. And then, taking the time to read more into, okay, past events that have happened. That's something that I've been kind of trying to challenge myself on. And that's another reason why I enjoy doing my series Sanction, not to plug it too much, but if you're a paid subscriber, you get access to 34 episodes so far. Some of those episodes are looking back at a day in history, and that's been really fun for me to kind of go back and say, okay, on this day in history, this is what happened, whether it's the Nord Stream attacks, whether it's, a war that kicked off or an attack that happened. it's really interesting to look back because so much of what happened in the past is still happening today, right? So many of these patterns we're seeing over and over again. And so I think just kind of being mindful of the content that you're consuming when you're doing that research is the key, I would say. And yeah, I think that's kind of what it boils down to. All right, let me see what else I've got going on here. And yeah, this is another one. Russia does not seek validation, and neither should Iran. Actions speak louder than words. Yeah, that's going to be, and that's kind of what that was my first thought when you had all of these reports that the US was claiming, oh, we're going to, or well, the reports that the US was possibly going to recognize Crimea. I'm like, Russia did not just go through the last 3 years of not only war, combat, the loss of soldiers, yes, but facing off against the West when they were trying to completely destroy the Russian economy as we know it. Russia did not go through all of that just so that the US would say, yeah, we recognize Crimea as part of Russia. Like, no, it's not about recognition. That's just something that we've seen Putin mention in his meetings with Steve Witkoff as like the bare minimum, right? Recognition in terms of these territories as part of Russia, that is the least the West can do. And then we're going to build up and go from there. And I appreciate all of the comments of y'all saying that you missed my old daily show. Thank you. I may try to bring back more live streams. At least I would love to do it monthly. It's more so just a thing of scheduling at this point and kind of figuring out the right time to do it. And y'all are right, we're already up to 105,000 subscribers on YouTube. And here I am with my 100K live stream. I'm a little bit late, but in my defense, that interview with Carl Zaw took off, and I did not expect that one to take off like it did. So the last 5,000 subscribers have come purely from that. Noted on some of these guest requests, I will try to take note, like I was saying earlier there. All right, let me see what else we've got going on, or any questions that I can keep up with here, or that I can catch up to. I think I'm getting caught up slowly but surely. And we are now at over an hour. We've been here for over an hour. Y'all have made this hour fly right by. And I have a couple of clips from Trump that I do want to get into. Let me see, just to make sure I'm almost caught up here with all of the comments that goodness. All right, I'm trying to figure out how many of these are questions and how many of these are just conversation back and forth, which I do still appreciate that y'all are here to kind of talk back and forth together. Oh, this is a good one. Can you alert when you were invited on someone's podcast? Yes, I do need to do more of that, both podcast, and I usually will always try to share if I'm on someone's podcast, but if I'm on someone's live stream, I'll try to do a better job about sharing that beforehand. It kind of ebbs and flows, right? I have a lot of people where I'll bring them on my show and I'm happy to go on theirs, and sometimes we kind of trade back and forth. And let me see. Alrighty. What else we've got going on here before I may just go ahead and toss to. All right. I do want to mention, because I cut these clips in here, I do want to mention some of what Trump said today, right? We had this Saudi US investment extravaganza, where, as I noted before, you had all of these different CEOs like the BlackRock CEO, Citigroup, Palantir, who were all present, a lot of different deals being made that Trump is really amplifying. And then he gets up and he talks about Syria, and he had this to say.
I will be ordering the cessation of sanctions against Syria in order to give them a chance at greatness.
All right, a chance at greatness. And just this announcement on its own is such a slap in the face to every civilian in Syria, right? Every person who has lived through more than a decade now of the US openly trying to overthrow the Syrian government. And finally, the US achieved it, right? They got the overthrow of Bashar al Assad that they had worked so hard for, that they had worked with Turkey and Israel and all of these extremists in order to achieve. And now all of a sudden they want to talk about sanctions relief. And I'm like, first of all, we haven't actually seen any of that happen. This is just Trump saying that he would make it happen. But I am looking at this and I'm going, the only reason that you're doing that is because the quote unquote president of Syria right now, Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, I'm still going by his al-Qaeda name because that is who he is at his core, right? This is the guy who was a part of ISIS, a key part of ISIS, who then helped to establish the al-Qaeda offshoot in Syria. He is an extremist at his core. He is in charge of all of these death squads of foreign mercenaries that the US wants to work with in particular. And so because of that, I look at this current situation. It's just so frustrating to watch. And I know that there are some people who are cheering on Trump right now, and I want to get into the article here that talks about it, right? They're cheering on Trump and saying, oh, he's, promising to ease sanctions on Syria and to move, or rather to restore relations with al-Jolani. And I'm looking at this and I'm going, yeah, you're doing that because al-Jolani is now in a place where he's talking about wanting to normalize ties with Israel and being open to that. He made the announcement shortly before he was set to meet on Wednesday in Saudi Arabia with, the fact that they call him Syrian president, they refer to him as al-Shara. I still call him al-Jolani. The one-time insurgent who last year led the overthrow of longtime leader Bashar al-Assad. Trump said the effort at rapprochement came at the urging of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the Saudi de facto ruler, and Turkish President Erdogan. Trump said of Syria, there is a new government that will hopefully succeed. I say, good luck, Syria. Show us something special. It's just, it would be laughable if it weren't for all of the civilians who have been, again, impacted by all of this. And you look at the current situation in Syria and you're like, okay, this has just become a playground for the US and Turkey and Israel to do whatever they want to this vitally important country for not just the region, for the axis of resistance. There's so much that I think we will see kind of the consequences of the overthrow of Assad's government from Syria as we go along. And it is very frustrating to see. Now, also interesting to see the summit that did happen. I won't stay too much longer, but I will go through kind of what I have lined up here to mention now that I'm finally getting around to these articles, to mentioning them. And so you have, let me make sure. All right, I did pull that up correctly. You have the White House today announcing $600 billion in Saudi investments in the U.S. during Trump's visit. This is what it's all about. This is why we're getting, this back and forth, these claims that, things that Trump is on the outs with Netanyahu because he is really working Saudi Arabia right now. They note that Trump praised Saudi Arabia and its leaders after the White House announced a commitment by the kingdom to invest $600 billion with a B, dollars in a series of deals with the US. Trump also announced at an investment forum in Riyadh that he will order the removal of all US sanctions against Syria. As I noted, they say that among the agreements secured is a nearly $142 billion with a B defense sales deal, providing the kingdom with state-of-the-art war-fighting equipment and services from a dozen U.S. defense firms. And here's my takeaway from that, right? Trump is looking at this right now. He's seeing the dollar signs, right? He's like $142 billion for U.S. defense firms, right? I guess that's bringing American manufacturing back home, or at least a version of it. And he's looking at the dollar signs. He's not looking at, okay, we sell all of these weapons to Saudi Arabia, excuse me. And we look at that aspect of it. Okay, what's Saudi Arabia going to do with all of these weapons? Or how does that then factor in to the current climate there in the region? Clearly, the US is on board with whatever Saudi Arabia wants. It has always been that way, even when you had Joe Biden, when he was on the campaign trail saying, oh, I'm going to, turn Saudi Arabia into the pariah that it is. Yet clearly he didn't do that. Instead, he was begging them to increase oil output, so that didn't work out too well for him. But it is notable to see the claims that are being made, and that also goes into Trump's next comment that he made during that speech when he was criticizing Western nation building, as if Trump was from some random island and then just happened to show up in Saudi Arabia, and he's now criticizing Western nation building. All right, let's take a listen to that clip.
And it's crucial for the wider world to note this great transformation has not come from Western interventionalists or flying people in beautiful planes giving you lectures on how to live and how to govern your own affairs. No. In the end, the so-called nation builders wrecked far more nations than they built, and the interventionalists were intervening in complex societies that they did not even understand themselves. They told you how to do it, but they had no idea how to do it themselves.
They had no idea how to do it themselves. And yet, Trump is still a part of that. Like, I will give him credit. He is the master of trying to make it look like he's just the third party, right? We're seeing this in the ongoing war in Ukraine, where you have Trump in this position where he's like, you know what? The US is just the third party. It's this conflict between Russia and Ukraine, between two neighboring countries. The US is just showing up, trying to help Russia and Ukraine figure things out. In the same way he's coming to Saudi Arabia, he's like, I don't know what the rest of the world has been doing to the Middle East, as if he was not president for 4 years before then. I'm like, you took part in the nation building. Why do you think that there is an all-out genocide in front of our eyes happening right now? Thanks to the Abraham Accords and all of the steps that Trump took to escalate tensions between Israel and Palestine, now we're seeing the results of that. And it is just, it's frustrating to watch the way that he tries to make it look like constantly like he's on the outskirts of it, or he's some sort of third party to it who just kind of showed up and, figured things out along the way. All right, let me pull up some more comments here now that I got through my video clips that I had lined up. This one says, why are you so beautiful? Well, thank you. You have mixed ancestry. Seriously, though, do you think a Trump-Putin meeting with major deals is possible? Okay. I will say I'm surprised that I did not get that comment this go around. I get a lot of comments asking about my ancestry. As far as I know, it is literally, I believe it's English, Irish, German, and one other, like Western European, and that's it. That is it. As far as I know from the tests that I've had done, I do get a lot of comments though asking if I am, a broad makeup. I know that I'm very tan, and I do not know where that came from, but that's just how things ended up. So no, as far as I know, I am the whitest, most Western European. That's my background. And no, I'm also not Jewish. I get that comment as well of people saying maybe because my name's Rachel. I don't know, but I do get that comment a lot. No, I am not. But in terms of the second part of your question, thank you for the super chat as well. In terms of the second part of your question, I do think there maybe somewhere in the distance a meeting is possible. I still think that from everything that we've seen from Russia, they still want that meeting between Putin and Trump to be when they have a deal finalized, and they're nowhere near having a deal finalized right now. So I would be legitimately surprised if I saw, Putin going off to Istanbul. If that happened, my next thought would be, okay, what is going on behind the scenes and what deals have been made? Because they don't want there to be, like, let's say, for example, that Putin, Zelensky, and Trump all show up in Istanbul on Thursday. There's no scenario where the three of them are going to come out and it's going to be a, hey, we made a deal, the war is over. There's just not, especially if you have Zelensky factored in. And so I think that from their standpoint, Russia wants that deal to be made when everything is kind of packaged up. They want the meeting to happen, when everything is kind of packaged up and ready to go, when there is actually a deal that is made. All right, let me see. What other comments I've got here? I know I've got more questions here. I'm trying to catch up. Let me see what else we've got on. I thank y'all for staying so long now that we're at an hour 20. All right, this one says Brian Berletic's analysis was spot on as yours. I think you may be referring to what I was saying earlier when I mentioned my past interview with him, talking about kind of the U.S. trying to, put this distance between themselves and Israel, at least making it look like that is the case. And yeah, Brian Berletic is one of those I enjoy following because he always makes me think, right? Anytime we have an interview, he always says something that I'm like, oh, I want to research that more. He'll bring up some policy paper from the early aughts that I was not aware of. And I'm like, you know what? I appreciate that, to have guests like that really do kind of challenge me and that educate me. And that's the thing. That's why I'm glad to be in this position of having kind of a mix of interviews and solo videos that I do, because in the solo videos, it can get to the point where I'm like, okay, am I stuck in my own echo chamber based on, whatever research I've done? Yes, I feel like I'm challenging myself, but being able to do these interviews and to talk to different guests is really cool because it opens up your worldview and mine as well. And so I'm grateful for that. All right, let's see what else we've got here. And what is happening in the chat? Let me see. I am so not caught up, y'all. I'm so sorry. I am working on it. I'm talking too much on my end. All right. This one says, is this what you do for a full-time job? I'm asking as I'm thinking of making my own channel, but not if it's worthwhile to me. It is right now. And this is something that, as I was saying earlier, I started working as an independent journalist, writing freelance, and kind of building my social media following 11 years ago. So it has not happened overnight. It has been a long time in the works to get to this point. And I think just in terms of a lot of it kind of speaks to where we are right now, right? This age there are a lot more independent journalists who are able to kind of make things work. There's a lot more of an appetite for people who are wanting more alternative media, right? They're wanting more than just the mainstream. And so they're looking out and saying, okay, what else is out there? And I think the networking aspect of it too is a really important thing. All of these people that come on my show that are coming on as guests, they are doing this work with their own free time, right? This is a favor that they are doing. Sure, they may get, some of them may get a few extra followers, or they may get people who hadn't previously heard of them, but they are doing this out of the kindness of their hearts. And I'm so grateful to have people that are willing to do that, because I am not in a place where I'm able to pay them, but maybe one of these days. Let me see what else I've got there. Some comments about Jax. He is still passed out. He's burrowed under his blanket, and he got his appearance, and he got his treat, which was his appearance fee. And I guess he's done for the moment. Let me see. Alrighty. there. And thank y'all for the super chats too. I appreciate that. I'm glad like I said, the last time that I had a live stream, I did not even realize that I didn't have super chats set up. And so I'm glad that now that I do, because YouTube was playing tricks on me. Another comment, this is YouTube will be giving me a 100K plaque. I hope they do. I have not gotten an email on that yet. We're at 105,000. YouTube is slacking on that, but I hope so. If I do get one, I'll find a place for it on my shelf. I'll rearrange things a little bit. Let me see what else I have here. Okay, another one that says, can you talk about what happened to Sputnik Radio? I used to listen to you on the radio. Yeah, I know there's quite a few people who are here from the show that I had on Sputnik that used to watch me then. So if you remember, hold on, Jax is moving around on there and distracting me. If you remember, that was on, Sputnik was on the radio. So there is the Sputnik Radio that is from Moscow that has its headquarters there. And then the version that was aired here in the US was based on an American production company here that created the content and then sold it to Sputnik in Moscow. And the show that I had with them, I had it for about a year, a little over a year, until basically the Biden administration implemented new sanctions that cut off the funding from RT, Sputnik, all of their parent companies in Moscow. So the production company that was here in the US that typically got their funding from Russia, now all of a sudden they couldn't get that funding anymore because the people that they got it from, were under sanctions. And so they ended up having to cease all operations and shut down. I know that there's been a lot of back and forth in terms of the possibility of the Trump administration lifting those sanctions, because obviously they were put in place by Biden. Trump could do it. Trump has not lifted the sanctions yet. I'm skeptical as to whether or not he's going to. I do not think he's going to easily, right? I think that it's going to be one of those things where, because the US establishment as it is has wanted to shut up RT and Sputnik, I don't think that they're going to let that go lightly. And now Jax is up and you want to get back up here? All right. Let me see if I can. Excuse me here. I have the little man wants to come back and say hi. Really, he just wants another treat. It's almost his feeding time, so we'll have to go here in a second. But Jax is back to say hi. Do you want another treat? Okay. And I will feed you because it's almost his dinner time. All right, you want another one? There you go. Good boy. All right. He's a good little buddy. And see, I've been on here so long that he got in a nap and now he's like, it's dinner time. All right. Let me see if I can catch up on the last of these. And then I may have to jump off here. And I appreciate all of y'all's comments. Again, you guys chiming in, it makes this live stream a lot more fun because it's not just me here talking to myself. It's me getting those comments as well. This is funny. Thank you for the $20 super chat. That's very kind of you, Max. Keep up the good work. What do you think controls Western mainstream media? But honest answer. I think that at the end, and I refer to it as the US establishment, but when you look at the Western mainstream media, right, and this goes for Fox News, CNN, all of the above, they're all part of this. They all are reliant on, first and foremost, their advertisers. So you're not going to see them criticize some of these big pharmaceutical companies because those are their top advertisers, right? You're seeing advertisements also for BlackRock, for other, well, see, he wants to be fed. You're seeing advertisements for other, Wall Street firms and such. And so because of that, anytime you get a story that's critical of them, all of a sudden CNN and Fox News are going to be like, hey, we need to tailor this a little bit. But beyond that, they also care about access. And Trump has kind of changed things up a little bit. But up until Trump, it was all about access. So you don't want to do a story that is too critical of an Obama or a Biden or a George W. Bush, because you are scared that you could lose access to the administration or to different parts of that administration. And I think that that's what it ultimately comes down to at the end of the day, is you have these companies that are operating like the corporations they are. They're not operating like the fourth estate of the media. They're operating on, how do we keep our profits and how do we keep our access? And because of that, it's become almost this revolving door where they're not holding the administration, whoever it may be, Democrat, Republican, accountable. They are instead telling them what they want to hear, and they're working hand in hand with them. And that's what we're seeing more and more of. And so I think that that's, if you want to talk about control, I think that's what it comes down to at the end of the day, right? It is the fear of breaking the system that they have all set up and worked so hard to put together. Let me see how. Okay, I think I'm getting caught up on these already. And thank you for all the kind words and for the super chats. Y'all are awesome. I'm trying to keep up on the ones that have a specific question on it before I hop off here. As Jax is now getting impatient, aren't you? I know. He has been very patient to let me do this for an hour and a half. And okay, let me see if there's anything. There's one I'm trying to make my way down here to. Let me see. Okay, one thing I do want to mention on this one, another one, and thank you for the super chat. I did mention another one that talked about kind of what happened, and that is the same that goes for Sputnik, RT America, which I worked for previously, obviously shut down in early 2022. And so that was a kind of a different situation where the production company that ran RT America they made this decision to shut things down on their end before there was any action that was taken by, what was at the time, the Biden administration. But in terms of all of the other show hosts that you saw on Sputnik, so like Garland Nixon, John Kiriakou, Jamal Thomas, I know Manila Chan and Ted Rawl also have a show that they do. They all have their own individual things. I know I'm forgetting some. There are others out there, and I apologize to them because their names are slipping their names right now. But all of the hosts that were on there, pretty much all of them all have their own individual projects that they have going on right now. So yeah, if you had a show that you were following, make sure that you're following the individual host on their social media accounts and kind of checking out their shows, because everyone's trying to do their thing independently. And I can speak to the fact that it is not the easiest. Every little bit of support helps. And I know that they definitely appreciate the fact that you guys are out there and chiming in and still remembering the value of their work. Alrighty, I may have to call it a day here. Let me see. Just try to wait. There's one. If I can get, I apologize. I'm trying to get this pulled up on the screen, and my screen, the technology decided that it could last for so long, and then it is failing me. Goodness, y'all have left a lot of comments, so thank you. I don't think I've ever had so many comments on a live stream. Let me see. Jax. All right, Jax may be telling me it's time to call it. Let me see. This is the one I was trying to get to. It says, thank you for the kind words and for the super chat. That's very kind of you. And Jax he's a good boy, right? He's looking at me like, you better feed me right now, woman. Actually, it's not. I said it was close to his time to eat. His time to eat is not for a little bit longer. If my sister is watching this, I am feeding him on time. I'm not feeding him early, just so you know. All right, a couple more comments, and then I really will call it a day, I promise. This one says, do you think that the Ukraine war was started to pull Russia out of Syria? So amongst other things, Israel could take land from Lebanon and Syria. That's an interesting question. It does go back, another Brian Berletic reference, because I know he often references the policy paper that is on the policy paper. Who it's from is escaping me. But I believe the title is Extending Russia. And basically they talk about, the plot to literally overextend Russia in all of these different places, not just in Ukraine, but in Syria. I don't know that that necessarily is the key reason, but I do think that all of it works together, right? The US is trying to weaken Russia in every way that it can. And so that then plays into, how do we weaken Russia using Ukraine? How do we weaken them in Syria? And then, of course, yes, Israel is right there waiting to get their hands on as much Syrian territory as they possibly can. All right. I think I'm caught up on super chat. I say that and then there's more. Y'all are too kind to me. I do very much appreciate all of your comments and your kind words. I think that's gonna have to do it for now. I will try to get on and to do another live stream here soon. Now that I see that there's so many of y'all in the comments and so many of you chiming in, I really do appreciate y'all making this worthwhile is not the right word, right? But hey, I'm happy to come on and to see that y'all are on here as well, and to see that you're chiming in. And Jax is happy for that too, aren't you? Right? Can you come and say hi to the people? He's like, can you finish up already? You're doing good. The people are happy to see you, right? Oh, thank y'all so much for tuning in again. And thank you for 100,000 subscribers. That is still an insane milestone, now up to 105,000. I'm so grateful for each and every one of you. Thank you also to all of my paid subscribers who are chiming in on my pages on Substack. That's rachelblevins.substack.com. My page on Patreon. That's patreon.com/rachelblevins. I'm grateful for those communities and looking forward to all of the stuff that I have planned for them coming up in the coming months. So thank y'all again. I hope you have a great rest of your day, night, wherever you are in the world. And I will see y'all next time. This is Blevins and Jax out.